Something exciting is happening. Many Jews today feel the need for a revitalized Judaism. People are searching for a more vital and authentic mode of Jewish expression, and more than ever we need to shift, not only physically, but spiritually out of exile mode. This is Torah Nation TV from Jerusalem, and we are speaking with the head of Machon Shilo, Rabbi David Bar-Hayim. Shalom, Rabbi Bar-Hayim.
Shalom.
Kaddish is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, whereas Kriat Shema is a mitzvah d'Oraita. Why then does the halacha require that a person pause if he hears Yesh Me Rabbah while he is saying Kriat Shema?
Well, the fact of the matter is there are a number of points that need to be answered here briefly. First of all, the question assumes that Kriat Shema is definitely min Torah, which is not necessarily the case according to all opinions. The original view of the Talmud Bavli, before it was amended at some point, perhaps at the time of the Geonim, at least in some versions of the Talmud, the original opinion of the Talmud Bavli was that Kriat Shema is not min Torah, but rather min Rabbanan. On the other hand, it's true that a majority of the Rishonim hold that it is min Torah, and this is in keeping with the later version, or one of the versions of the Talmud Bavli, and also certainly in keeping with what the Talmud Yerushalmi states unequivocally, without any disagreement and without any emendations whatever, that Kriat Shema is min Torah. So let's assume for now that Kriat Shema is min Torah. We have another question which needs to be addressed here, and that is, when one is reciting Kriat Shema, does one stop to answer something like Amen Yesh Me Rabbah or Kedusha or something of that sort? This is a mahaloket amongst the posakim. There is a disagreement amongst the halachic authorities on this point, as the Tur quotes in Siman Samech Waw, and there is not one halachic opinion or one authoritative opinion on the matter. It is quoted in the name of Rashi that when one is standing in Shmoneh Esrei, not Kriat Shema, but for the moment I'll give the example of the Shmoneh Esrei. When one is standing in Tefillah in Shmoneh Esrei and his Kedusha, for example, it is quoted in the name of Rashi that his view was that one should stop reciting the words of the Tefillah and listen to what the Tzibur, the community, is saying and answering, and concentrate on those words that he hears them saying, and then when that is over, continue with his tefillah. And what we find, if we go back to even earlier sources than Rashi, is that this is an ancient tradition. The fact is that it's also quoted by Rav Saadia Gaon, and I will quote this to you briefly. Rav Saadia Gaon, in his Sidur on page 44, writes that if one is standing in the middle of the tefillah of Shmoneh Esrei, and he hears either Baruch Hu or Kedusha or Modim or Yesh Me Rabbah, what is he to do? Says Rav Saadia Gaon. He says, Sarich lishtok u'lishma ma she'omer hasibur. One has to stop and listen to what the Sibur is saying and answering. U'lihitkawen bilibo, and to concentrate, focus on those words, so that he's also thinking these words. U'cheshehem gomeru, and when they finish responding, Hozer b'gomera tefillah, then he continues with his tefillah. This is Rav Saadia Gaon with reference to what one does if one is in the middle of the Shmoneh Esrei. And some posakim are of the view that the same is true, but even more so when one is in the middle of Shema or the middle of Birkot Kriat Shema, that one stops, and in fact one even answers for certain things. This is one opinion. And with regards to what one does during the Shmoneh Esrei, this view, as we see, is also quoted by the Geonim. It seems to go back to an early period, and therefore it seems like a very authoritative opinion. And this is also the minhag ha'olam, as the Tosafot point out. This is the practice, the general practice of the Jewish people. So that is a correct practice. But with regards to your question about what one does, or whether one should stop and respond to certain things like Amen Yesh Me Rabbah in the middle of Kriat Shema, it is not so certain, and this is not the only opinion, that this is what one should do. Rambam's opinion seems quite plain, that one does not stop. One simply continues saying Kriat Shema. One does not respond or take a break or do anything of the sort. we have a Teshuvah of the Rambam in Siman Chof Peh, where he seems to express this idea that when one is involved in one kind of mitzvah, one kind of shevach, of praise of Hashem, one doesn't need to stop doing what one is doing with this particular form of tefillah or shevach, of praise, and switch to another form, or to busy oneself with some other mitzvah or some other shevach. This is not necessary, says the Rambam. If you're doing the one, you're like a person who's osek b'mitzvah, and you're patur min ha-mitzvah, you're exempt from doing the other thing. If you're involved in one form of tefillah and shevach, you're exempt from the other form of tefillah or shevach. So it seems from what the Rambam writes in that Teshuvah. And we also have the statement of the Rambam at the end of Perek Yod in Ilchot Tefillah, where he's also speaking here about Shmona Esrei. As we said before, with regards to Rav Saadia Gaon, he says something similar, but actually, nevertheless, a little bit different from Rav Saadia Gaon and from Rashi. He says that if a person is saying the Shmona Esrei and he hears Kedusha, lo yafsik, v'lo ya'aneh Kedusha imahem. Lo yafsik implies he doesn't stop and break in his tefillah at all, because he says two things: lo yafsik, v'lo ya'aneh Kedusha imahem. In other words, he could have just said lo ya'aneh Kedusha imahem. He doesn't respond. But perhaps to stop and just listen, for example, to what's being said, you might be correct in doing so. But the Rambam says lo yafsik, v'lo ya'aneh Kedusha imahem. It seems, therefore, the Rambam's view is that, not like Rashi, not like Rav Saadia Gaon, other Geonim, that one continues without break. So the Rambam's position, both with regards to Tefillah and with regards to Kriat Shema, seems to be that one does not stop for any of these things. One simply continues with what one is doing. And the Rambam continues and says, "V'chen lo ya'aneh amen yeheh shemei Rabbanu v'rach v'hu be'emsa tefillah." If you hear Kaddish in the middle of Tefillah, you don't stop, you don't answer. And the same is true, says the Rambam, and even more obviously so, with regards to other barachot. In other words, the Rambam seems to be including in this statement, v'chen, with reference to other barachot, shar barachot, the Rambam seems to be saying that if one is involved in saying, for example, Birkot Kriat Shema, which is another example of a bracha, and the Rambam speaks about all other types of bracha, Shal Barachot, it seems the Rambam's view is that one does not stop or to answer or to pause in any way. The Rambam doesn't mention this idea of the Geonim or of Rashi. So Rambam's view, and this is the other view quoted by the Torah in Siman Samech Waw, is that one doesn't stop at all, and one simply continues with the mitzvah that one is involved in doing. As for the question of why would something which is not min ha-Torah cause one to stop or to take a break in the middle of doing something which is min ha-Torah, this question is, I think, misguided from its inception, because it seems to be assuming that the Torah is somehow divided into two categories: that which is min ha-Torah and that which is not min ha-Torah, that which is min divrei sofarim, and that it's always clear and obvious that that which is min ha-Torah is greater or more important or takes precedence over something which is midivrei sofarim. Now, it is true that sometimes this is the case, as we see, for example, in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, with regards to the question of a person who has the choice of going to a place, to a town, a village, or a Beth Knesset, a synagogue, where he can hear the shofar being blown, or he can hear the brachot of Musaf being recited, but he can't do both. Where should he go? Should he go to the shul where he'll hear the shofar, or to the shul where he'll hear the brachot of Musaf? The answer of the Tosefta is that he should go to the shul where he will hear the shofar being blown, and not the shul where they're saying Musaf, because one is min ha-Torah and the other one is not min ha-Torah. Sometimes it is true, therefore, that one takes precedence over the other, and one has this option of either doing either one or the other. Then you have to choose that which is min ha-Torah. But in a case such as this, first of all, even if it's true that the halakha is according to those views that in certain situations, as we discussed, one does stop what one is doing and either answers quite literally with one's mouth, one actually responds, or one listens to the response of the tzibur, of the community. Either way, the notion that this somehow is denigrating that which is min ha-Torah, or elevating something which is min divrei sofrim, I think is misguided and incorrect, because we have to understand that the Torah is really not really divided into these two categories where one is always higher or better than the other. The Torah was given to Am Yisrael, precisely because they are Am Yisrael, because they're able and are especially created for the purpose. They were especially created for the purpose of receiving the Torah and implementing this Torah in the real world. And if something, a tefillah, like Kedusha or like Kaddish, which express the true yearnings and the quintessence of what it is to be Jewish, and what the true aspirations of the Jewish people are, and every Jewish individual is in this world, then such a statement of intent, as it were, such as Kaddish, is a very, very great and important thing. It matters not one whit whether it is Minat Torah or Midivrei Soferim or just a minhag. Even if it's only minhag, the concept of Kedusha or Kaddish and the ideas that it expresses are so fundamental to who we are and to what we are about in this world that yes, that can definitely be a legitimate reason to stop what one is doing while saying Kriat Shema. And one could of course mention that the Mishnah states that when one speaks to, when one is reciting Kriat Shema and one is greeted by someone, someone says hello to you, you're allowed to respond. In fact, in certain situations you are expected to initiate such an exchange and greet this person, because the kavod of the briot, the honor and the respect due to other human beings, is also a very important part of Judaism. That is also sufficient reason to stop and to interrupt one's recitation of Kriat Shema. To sum up, I would remind us all that the Midrash in Shir HaShirim states that in the name of Rabbi Yohanan, that Havivim Divrei Soferim Midivrei Torah. That is to say, Divrei Soferim in many ways are more Haviv, are more precious than the words of the Torah, because the words of the Torah come to us from above. The things which are explicitly in the Torah come from a source without. But we also know, on the other hand, that source, that Torah min hashamayim, was given to us precisely because we, the Jewish people, are who we are. In other words, without there being a recipient, the Torah would not have been given in the first place. The Torah, in other words, comes after the reality of the Jewish people existing. This is what Chazal say elsewhere, that Yisrael kadamu la Torah. Am Yisrael actually came before, or were thought up by Hashem, by the Creator, before the Torah was created, so to speak, because the Jewish people are the final address and the final destination of that Torah. So the giving of the Torah and the receiving of the Torah and the recipient of the Torah and that which the recipients of the Torah, the Jewish people, are able and willing and interested in expressing in order to fulfill and further their mission on earth, all of this is of extreme and very great significance and importance, and we should therefore learn to view these things not in simple black and white terms of this is Minat Torah and this is not Minat Torah, but to see the larger and more profound picture.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the Rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the Rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.